You know, there are some women in royal history who seem to live just slightly out of the spotlight. Not forgotten, not at all, but always just a little overshadowed by louder names. Princess Mary, the Princess Royal and Countess of Harewood, was one of them. She was the only daughter of King George V and Queen Mary. Just imagine, born in 1897 at the very tail end of the Victorian era and named after Queen Victoria herself. The world she came into was one of titles, tight schedules, governesses, and the unbending rhythm of royal tradition. And by the time she passed away in 1965, everything around her had changed beyond recognition. She lived through 6 monarchs on the throne, saw 2 world wars unfold, and witnessed the coronation of her own niece, Elizabeth II. Princess Mary was never the glamorous rebel type or the subject of breathless headlines. No, she was something else entirely, steady, grounded, and not afraid to roll up her sleeves. During the First World War, she became a nurse, the first woman in the royal family to take on that role. Imagine that. And it wasn't just symbolic. She helped organize the delivery of over 2.5 million Christmas gift boxes to soldiers on the front. Real packages with tobacco, sweets, and cards. She didn't just wave from carriages, she cared. And maybe that's exactly why the story of her jewels is so unusual. Because unlike many royal collections built up over generations and passed from queen to queen, most of Mary's treasures came to her, almost in a single day. February 28, 1922, her wedding day. It was the first grand royal wedding after the war, and London celebrated with all its heart. The streets were packed, flags were everywhere, and along the procession route stood the newly built cenotaph, the monument to the fallen. Mary rode to Westminster Abbey beside her father, the king. She was 24. Her fiancé, Viscount Lascelles, was 39, a decorated war hero, wounded and gassed in battle, and heir to one of the most distinguished aristocratic families in Britain. It may come as a surprise, but on her wedding day, Mary didn't wear a tiara, not a single diamond in her hair. Back then, in the early 1920s, floral wreaths were in vogue, and hers was made of orange blossoms, carefully layered to hold her veil in place. No diamonds, no sapphires, just flowers. But the gifts she received? Oh, now that's another story entirely. That's where we'll begin. Because the treasures that found their way into Princess Mary's hands that year, how she wore them, changed them, and sometimes quietly let them go, offer us a glimpse into the life of a royal woman who stood just outside the center of power, but never strayed from her sense of duty. Shall we open her jewel box? Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. They say a royal wedding reflects the spirit of its time, and Mary's wedding in 1922, after 4 long years of war and a difficult national recovery, became a true celebration for Britain, a symbol of hope. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey was grand, but not overly showy. It struck just the right tone, dignified but not ostentatious. The gifts, though, that's where the brilliance came in, quite literally. One of the most dazzling presents was a jewel with an extraordinary past, Queen Victoria's Sapphire Coronet. Originally designed by Prince Albert in 1842, it had long been one of Victoria's most beloved pieces. She wore it for portraits, to the state opening of Parliament, and even during mourning, carefully placed over her widow's lace cap. And in 1922, King George V gave it to his only daughter. Not as a formal heirloom passed from queen to queen, but as a personal gift, from father to daughter. What a moment that must have been. Along with the coronet, Mary also received a matching sapphire necklace and bracelet, part of Queen Victoria's original parure. You can only imagine the symbolism. Jewels once belonging to a reigning monarch now entrusted to a young woman stepping into a new role. Not an heir to the throne, but a royal in her own right, beginning a life just beyond the palace walls. But the sapphires were just the beginning. There was also the diamond chain, a gift from the City of London, presented publicly just days before the wedding. It was the very essence of 1920s elegance. 9 sections of brilliant cut diamonds, joined by delicate boat-shaped links, with a removable pendant at the center featuring a pear-shaped stone. A grand piece, yes, but surprisingly modern for its time. Mary wore it often, with tiaras, with evening gowns, always with a quiet confidence that became something of a signature. Then came the fringe tiara, a gift from Lord and Lady Inchcape. A classic design, vertical diamond rays echoing the style of Russian kokoshniks, a look favored by queens and empresses for generations. We'll be seeing more of this tiara later on, as Mary wore it for decades. Among the official records of wedding gifts, there's one more remarkable entry, the scroll tiara. Now, technically, this wasn't a royal heirloom. It was made by Gerard using diamonds inherited by her future husband, part of the Clanricarde family treasures, which had reportedly sat untouched in a bank vault for nearly a century. And there was even a family legend that one day these diamonds would belong to a daughter of a king. And so they did. Romantic, isn't it? Several of these gifts, including Queen Victoria's coronet, the fringe tiara, the scroll tiara, and the diamond chain, were put on public display at St. James's Palace in the days leading up to the wedding. And among them was one particularly intriguing piece, a sapphire necklace said to have come from Russia. But that one deserves its own story. We'll return to it a little later. It's quite the mystery. Not all of Mary's wedding jewels were grand, formal court pieces. Some were softer, more symbolic, and deeply personal. The County of Yorkshire, for instance, presented her with a brooch featuring 3 large emeralds. The Royal Navy gave her a diamond and emerald negligee necklace, long with pendants and a bit more relaxed in style than the sharp, streamlined trends of the day. In recognition of her wartime service as a nurse with the Voluntary Aid Detachment, 50,000 members of the VAD came together to present her with a diamond and emerald tiara. Crafted by Hunt and Roskell, the piece was remarkably versatile. Its side sections could be detached, and the central portion flipped over to become a brooch. There are no known photographs of Mary wearing it, but the gesture behind it, so collective, so heartfelt, speaks volumes. One tiara that eventually came into Princess Mary's possession, though not officially listed among the wedding gifts, was the honeysuckle tiara, 5 diamond flowers, each one detachable and wearable as a brooch. Created around 1865, the piece had once belonged to her mother, Queen Mary, though there's no known record of her ever wearing it publicly. At some point, it was passed on to Princess Mary, likely as a gift, perhaps around the time of her wedding. Then there's the laurel wreath bandeau, a piece that raises more questions than answers. We have at least 2 surviving portraits of Princess Mary wearing it, one likely taken in the 1910s, and another clearly dated to 1922, just before her wedding. In both, the tiara is worn low across the forehead in the bandeau style that was fashionable at the time. It's delicate, symmetrical, made of diamond-set laurel leaves that seem to extend well past the ears, almost more like a headband than a traditional diadem. After her wedding, though, we never see the tiara on Princess Mary again. It disappears from her photographic record entirely. Then, in 1924, Queen Mary was photographed wearing a very similar piece. But this is where things get uncertain. The surviving images are grainy and rare, yet some observers have noted a difference. The version worn by Queen Mary appears to have shorter laurel elements, ending closer to the temples. So what are we looking at? The same tiara, altered? Alone returned to its original owner? Or 2 separate tiaras crafted in a similar style? We don't know. The laurel wreath bandeau doesn't appear in auction records, wasn't sold with Princess Mary's other jewels, and there's no definitive documentation linking it to either woman. If it was Queen Mary's all along, temporarily worn by her daughter, it may well still exist somewhere, quietly stored among the Windsor vaults. And that's part of the fascination with royal jewels. Some are centerpieces of coronations, others flicker briefly through photographs and vanish, leaving behind just enough mystery to keep us asking. In the years following her marriage, Princess Mary's public life settled into a steady rhythm. Quieter than that of her brothers, perhaps, but no less devoted. She wasn't a globe-trotting royal splashed across headlines. She was simply there, at ceremonies, in hospital wards, at regimental parades, doing the work that didn't always make the front page. And when she appeared in public, her jewels never shouted, but they always spoke. One of the most striking pieces she wore in the early 1920s was that scroll tiara, the one made with the Clanricarde diamonds. Its central element was interchangeable, and Mary often chose a version featuring a large oval sapphire framed in diamonds. That sapphire, too, had a story. It was a wedding gift from her mother, Queen Mary. Some have speculated it might have once been one of Prince Albert's sapphire brooches, though that's never been confirmed. What we do know is this: Princess Mary posed in that tiara, with the sapphire, for official portraits soon after her marriage. She paired it with Queen Victoria's sapphire necklace and a spectacular corsage ornament. The very same Russian sapphire piece glimpsed among her wedding gifts. Originally, it had been a necklace from the Russian imperial collection, acquired by Viscount Lascelles after the Revolution. It was displayed among the wedding presents, but it was far too heavy to wear around the neck. Mary found a solution. She wore its elements as brooches, or transformed it into a corsage ornament, artfully arranged across the bodice of her gown. This combination, the scroll tiara with the sapphire, the Russian corsage ornament, and Queen Victoria's sapphire necklace, became something of a ceremonial uniform for Mary during the 1920s. Do you remember the honeysuckle tiara? Such a delicate, almost intimate piece. It never attracted much public attention, but it seems to have held a special place for Mary. There's a portrait from the early 1920s where she's wearing it with the diamond chain from the City of London. By royal standards, it's quite a modest tiara. No towering spikes or enormous gems. Just graceful floral lines, beautifully balanced and understated. It was also a very practical piece. It was refined, but easy to travel with. And the floral elements could be worn as brooches, making it one of her most versatile pieces. And Mary did travel. In 1962, when she attended the centenary of the Canadian-Scottish Regiment, which bore her name, she appeared at a regimental ball in Toronto wearing the honeysuckle tiara and that same diamond chain from 1922. By the 1940s and 50s, Princess Mary had become a steady, if not headline-grabbing, presence in British public life. Official ceremonies, hospital visits, military functions. Her work never really stopped, and her jewels, it seems, didn't stay in their cases either. In one portrait from that period, she's wearing the diamond chain again. Its elegant links and pear-shaped pendant were no longer new, but still looked striking. And then there's a curious moment from 1954, the state visit of the Swedish royal couple to Britain. For a gala evening at Covent Garden, Mary wore her emerald necklace. Do you remember the emerald brooch from Yorkshire and the emerald negligee from the Royal Navy? At some point, she had those combined into one grand necklace, 5 prominent emerald motifs with double rows of diamonds. On that night, she paired it with the scroll tiara, but this time in its full diamond version, a more neutral, shimmering frame for the vivid green of the emeralds. While we only have black and white photographs from that evening, it's easy to imagine how striking the emeralds must have looked against the diamonds, especially under evening lights. Some of Princess Mary's most memorable appearances in jewels came at coronations. First, at her brother's, King George VI, in 1937. The royal family gathered at Westminster Abbey for Britain's first coronation in over 25 years, the first since King George V's in 1911. Now officially the Princess Royal, Mary took her place among foreign sovereigns and Britain's highest nobility. For this moment, she chose a powerful trio: the scroll tiara in its sapphire setting, Queen Victoria's sapphire necklace, and the Russian corsage ornament placed prominently across the bodice of her gown. Interestingly, nearly the same combination appeared again in 1953 at the coronation of her niece, Elizabeth II. 16 years had passed, and yet Princess Mary chose the same tiara, the same necklace, and the same sapphire corsage. Was it a quiet nod to tradition, or simply a personal favorite? What do you think? In contrast to the deep blue of her coronation sapphires, the fringe tiara offered something brighter, a neutral brilliance that Mary turned to more frequently in the 1950s and early 60s. Do you remember? It was a wedding gift from Lord and Lady Inchcape, that classic kokoshnik shape with its sharp vertical diamond spikes had become a staple in royal jewelry across Europe. Mary wore it for a gala during the French state visit in 1950, again for the opening of the Festival of Britain in 1951, and later during the Greek state visit in 1963. The tiara also traveled abroad for symbolic occasions, when Mary represented the Queen, such as the independence ceremonies of Trinidad and Zambia. Thus, the fringe tiara became her choice for official occasions abroad and key ceremonial moments in the 1950s and early 60s, including state visits and independence celebrations. And interestingly, when Princess Mary was portrayed in the Downton Abbey film, set in the late 1920s, it was this tiara that costume designers chose to recreate. But time moved on, and after Princess Mary's death in 1965, her jewelry collection did not remain intact. Some of the most significant pieces, the ones we've seen in portraits, at state events, and in quieter moments, were sold off in the years that followed. Others had already gone during her lifetime, likely to help support Harewood House and the estate. The scroll tiara, made with the Clanricarde diamonds, was sold at auction in 1970, along with the large sapphire brooch that had once graced its center. The fringe tiara, that classic wedding gift, had been sold even earlier, in 1966, just a year after her passing. It ended up in the collection of the Dukes of Westminster. We haven't seen it worn publicly in recent years, but it still exists, quietly held in private hands. The emerald necklace, the one created from those two early gifts, was sold while Princess Mary was still alive. Along with the Russian sapphire corsage, it went under the hammer in 1960. Years later, in 1988, it appeared again at Christie's in Geneva. Its current whereabouts remain unknown. The diamond chain from the City of London stayed in the family for several more years before being sold at Christie's in 1970. The honeysuckle tiara, too, disappeared from view for decades, but it eventually resurfaced at auction in 1999, and after the sale, vanished once more into private hands. But one piece lingered longer than the rest. Queen Victoria's Sapphire Coronet, the most historically significant jewel in Mary's collection, remained with the family well into the 1980s and possibly even the 1990s. It was worn by the Countess of Harewood in 1977 during Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee and again at a family wedding in 1992. But sometime after the death of the 7th Earl of Harewood in 2011, the coronet was quietly sold. Its departure caused public outcry. There was real concern that such an iconic piece might leave Britain forever. Fortunately, in 2017, it was acquired by the Victoria and Albert Museum, where it's now part of their permanent display. And yet, not everything vanished. Two small elements from the Russian sapphire corsage are believed to have survived, now a pair of earrings, each with a sapphire set in diamonds. One was worn by Mary's daughter-in-law, Patricia, Countess of Harewood, and the other by her great-granddaughter-in-law on her wedding day in 1992. The rest of the corsage had been sold to Harry Winston in 1960 and hasn't been seen since. Most of Princess Mary's jewels are now scattered, sold, repurposed, or absorbed into new collections. But their memory, and hers, hasn't faded. Sometimes all it takes is a photo, an official portrait, a blurry snapshot from a gala, a smile caught at the edge of a group picture. You spot a tiara, a necklace, a brooch, and there she is again. Some pieces have returned to public view, like Queen Victoria's Sapphire Coronet, now stopping visitors in their tracks at the Victoria and Albert Museum, drawn in by the sparkle, the story, the name. Princess Mary was never a queen. She was not an heir to the throne, and she didn't need to be. Her jewels weren't symbols of power, they were signs of presence, of duty, of a life lived not in the spotlight, but never without meaning. Thank you for spending this time with me, and with Princess Mary. Her story may not be the loudest in royal history, but there's something quietly extraordinary in it. And sometimes, it's the quiet stories that stay with us the longest. If you enjoyed this glimpse into her treasures and the moments they witnessed, I'd love to have you with me again. Subscribe if you'd like. There are many more royal stories still waiting to be told. And until then, take care and thank you again for watching.